Just very quickly revise what we have done in the last few classes. This is the 12th class on web technologies today. We have started with learning this subject. I told you the subject is very important from your examinations point of view and also from your careers point of view. We started learning first what is the internet. We learned what is HTML. We designed our small, simple web pages using HTML tags. And then later we started with a new topic called as cascading style sheets, CSS. We are learning CSS 3, the third version of CSS. And then we first saw the syntax of writing CSS. How is a CSS written? When we write a CSS, first we write it in the form of, we write a selector first, then we open the flower bracket, and then after that we define the style. How is style defined? We write property value pairs separated by semicolons. That is how we write CSS. We have seen all that. And then we understood what is the meaning of, where are the different locations, very important again from examinations point of view, which are the different places, where are the different locations, of writing your CSS. I told you there are 3 places where CSS is written. Okay, first is inline, when it is written within the tag. Second is when it is written at the document level on the top in the head section of the HTML, it is called as embedded. Second type of writing CSS is writing it in the head section of the HTML file. It is called as embedded. And the third way or third technique of writing CSS is defining it in an external file and saving it with extension .css and then linking it with your HTML page. Okay, so we have seen this yesterday, not yesterday, in the last class. We have seen this in the last class, which are the different places where cascading style sheets can be defined. Okay, so we have seen this. Now we're going to start with a very important topic from examinations point of view. What is the meaning of a selector? I told you the selector is something which will tell the browser on which part of the HTML document the style has to be applied. If I've defined a CSS code, whether inline or whether at the document level or whether in the external, if I define my style in the embedded, that is at the document level, when you define the style in the start of the HTML document, it is called as embedded. At the document level, you define it. And when you define it in an external file, it is called as external cascading style sheets. It's external file. Okay, so we have done that in the last class. Now, what I am saying is when you define a style, now the browser should know, the browser should know on which particular part of the HTML document or on which element the style has to be applied. The browser should know that. We tell the browser, please apply this style that we have defined, whatever style we defined. Okay, let us take an example of this. Apply the style of font size 18 and font weight bold. Let us say these are the 2 styles. Font size is 18 and font weight is bold. We want the browser to apply this style. Now, how do we tell the browser that this style has to be applied on a particular part of the document? If I define it like this, H2 into flower bracket, font size 18, font weight bold, the browser will immediately come to know that wherever there is H2 tag available. What is H2? You all know H2 is a tag. It's an element in HTML. What is H1? H1 is also a tag. It's an element in an HTML document. You can see it here. This is a tag, no? H1 and H2 tags. These are elements in HTML document. So when I say H1 and then I define a style here, the browser immediately will come to know that this style of font size 24 has to be applied on a tag H1. So wherever H1 appears in the document, remember the browser will apply this style. Similarly, wherever H2 tag appears in the document, the browser will apply this style. So this is how we tell the browser on which tags, on which part of the HTML document the style should be applied. This is called as selector. H1, H2 is called as selector. So in this definition of style sheet here, which are the selectors? H1 and H2 are selectors. Okay, so that's why you can see on the top here in the syntax of HTML, in the syntax of CSS, you can see here, first thing when you define the style, what appears first is selector. You can see here, selector comes first. You write H1, H2, and then you write the property, font size, 18 pixels, font weight, bold. So what we write first is a selector. Then you will have a doubt. You will ask me, sir, then in that case, whatever we write there is called as a selector. Is it always H1 and H2 are the selectors? Is that the case all the time? It is not the case all the time. Whenever you don't always write h1 and h2 here, like how we wrote here h1 and h2, like this h1 h2. You don't always write only tag names here as a selector. Sometimes you write something else also, and that is what we're going to study under selectors. What are the things that you can write in the section, in the place where the selector is to be placed? Okay, so whenever a selector has to be placed in the definition of a style, what do we write there? First thing you have already learned, we can write the names of the elements there. We can write h1, h2, we can write p tag, we can write h3 tag. Any tag of HTML we can write there, no problem, as a selector. Apart from that, what else we can write there in the selector section of the style? Okay, so first of all, you should know what is a selector. By definition, they will ask you a question like this. They will ask you, what are selector forms? Okay, with respect to cascading style sheets, what are selectors? They will ask any question, any of this type. They can ask you what are selector forms, or they can ask you what is a selector with respect to cascading style sheets. So you have to write that the selector in CSS is a way to tell the browser on which part the style has to be applied in the HTML document. Okay, that is what has to be written. Somewhere here it will be there. Okay, there is a little example that has been given of student identifying, the teacher identifies this, all that it's given. Okay, then finally there will be a small definition here. Normally whenever we have an HTML document, how is the document? You know, this is the tree structure. Always we start with an HTML document. HTML will have two sections, head section and the body section. Head section will have title tag. You know that in the head tag only we write the title tag. Sometimes in the header tag, we write the meta tag also. Okay, we have not used this meta tag. Why do we use it and all that? We will see it later on. But in the head section, the meta tag also appears. Then in the body tag, what all will appear? H1 can appear, H2 can appear, paragraph tag can appear, image tag, H3, division, P tag. Inside the division tag, again, there can be paragraphs. Inside the paragraph, then there can be a tag called as time tag and all that. So these are the different tags that can appear in the body tag. Okay, so more or less you have understood this tree structure. First is always the root element, that is the HTML. Then you have the head section, then you have the body section. Head section contains these two, and the body sections can contain anything here. Can contain anything. It might contain H1, it might not contain H1, but it is given like this here. Okay, let us assume this as the body of the HTML document. Okay, now what is the first type of a selector? The first type, there are 6 different types of selectors. Remember, there are 6 different types of selectors that we can write when we define a CSS. Okay, element selector. First is the element selector. Okay, what is the element selector? Element selector is a selector in which you specify the name of the element on which the style has to be applied. The first and the most simplest type of a selector is the selector will be the name of an HTML element, HTML tag like H1, H2. So all the examples that you have seen so far is element selector technique, where you specify the name of the tag on which the style has to be applied. Okay, you specify, you mention the name of the tag itself as a selector, and on that particular tag the browser will then apply the style. So element selector is a technique where you specify the element on which the style has to be applied. Okay, then again in element selector there is one more which is called as a universal element selector, one more called as universal element selector, where you specify, you don't specify. Okay, I'll just write here, this will be more easy. I'll just give you examples of element selector. Okay, element selector, I will give you one example. Okay, example of element selector is H1 we write, and then we write okay, so this is an example of element selector. Why this is called as element selector? What is this? Tell me, what is this? So these two are examples of element selector. Why element selector? Because the selector here is names of the tag directly. are names of the tag directory. So when you specify the names of the tags directly, this is called as element selector. I hope this is clear. Okay, let us not waste much time here. Then there is one more thing called as any tag. Huh? You can take any tag. If I write h3 here, and if I do that, if I write h3 here, and if I do this, remember this is also element, because as long as you write the name of the element here, HTML element, this is called as element selector. So this is an example of element selector. So what is the definition of element selector? Element selector is a technique in which the selector is the name of the HTML element directly. Example is h1, and then you can define some property here. You can define some style here. Okay. Now there is one more thing inside element selector called as universal element selector. It is called as universal element selector. Now this is something which is very rarely used. It is not commonly used. This is very rarely used, this universal. What happens here is you specify a star and then you define a style. You specify a star here, asterisk symbol, and then you define a style here like this. You define a style, font size 24, font weight bold. Now, how will the browser come to know where to apply this style? When it sees that there is a star, the browser knows, this is universal element. Universal element selector, it will come to know, the browser. And hence, you know what will happen in case of universal? It will apply, who will apply? The browser will apply this style on all the elements. H1, H2, H3, P, div, span tag, div tag, any tag that appears in the HTML document, remember this particular style will be applied. You will say this is something which is not useful at all. This is not good. Why will somebody want the same style to be applied to all the tags? But this facility is available. That's why I told you this is very rarely used. Only in some special cases, wherever you want to apply the same style in all the tags, this is where it is used. Okay, but it is very rarely used. Remember that. So whenever you specify an asterisk symbol here, a star here, and when you have a style here, this style will be applied on all the tags. This is called as universal element selector. Okay, please remember this. In the examination they will ask you, okay, what are element selectors, and specifically they might ask you what is universal element selector. I hope this asterisk symbol is clear with all of you. Okay, so let us go further. That's it. This is about element selectors. Okay, next comes class selector. Next comes class selector. Okay, now class selector is defined. Okay, now one more thing about element selector I forgot to tell you is that this is an example of what? If you look at this, this is an example of element selector because here you have written an element. This is an example of element selector because div is also an element. A side remember is also an element. Okay, so instead of writing these three separately, p tag also the same. If all these tags have got common properties, then you can specify it like this: p comma div comma a side flower brackets, and then you can specify the style. So on all these tags, this style will be applied. So you can separate them by commas and you can write it commonly also. So this is also finally element selector only. This is also element selector only, but you group them together. You group them together. Okay, so this is grouped element selector. Same thing. This is, we are still in the first type of selector form, element selector form. First we learned simple, where we specify it only single name of the element and then the style here. Then we universal we did, where it will apply the style on all the tags, and this is grouped element selector, where you group the elements p comma div comma a side, and then you define a style here. So this style will be applied on these particular tags which appears in the HTML document. Okay, that is it. Okay, next is class selector. Next is class selector. What is this class selector? Okay, I will directly go to the example and then you can come back to the. Okay, in class selector, what happens is, yeah, you can see here in the class selector, you define the style. You define the style by giving it your own name. Okay, you can give any name to the class. Okay, you can give any name to the class. Let us say I want to call that my style as first. I want to call the style as first. I have to start that with a dot here. Dot, write the name of the selector that you want to give. Okay, when you start it with a dot, it becomes a class selector. Remember, when you start it with a dot like this, it is called as a class selector. So whenever you want to define a class selector, you have to start it with a dot followed by some name you give, and then you define the style. Font style is italic, color is red. Okay, so you define a style here. And then what is a selector here? The selector is some name you give. Okay, before that you put a dot. When you put a dot, it means it is class selector. Now you have defined it. Now, how will the browser come to know where to apply this style? There is no tag called as first. Is there any tag in the HTML called as first? There is no tag in HTML called as first. Then where will the browser apply this? It will apply it like this. If there is a h1 tag, in the h1 tag I have to write class is equals to first. I have to write class is equals to first. Okay, and then I write something. I want to display something on the browser, so I write reviews. I write reviews. So now you know what? H1 tag is there, and I'm telling that in this H1 tag, use the class first. Use the class first. So in first, whatever style is defined here will be applied on this H1 tag. Will be applied on this H1 tag. Okay, so it is something like this. So I will remove this now. So class selector is something like this. How do we define the class selector? First, we start with a dot followed by some name. Okay, my style. Let us say the name of the style is my style, and then I write here font size is I want it small, so I write 10 pixels. Okay, I write 10 pixels, and font weight I'll say that, and then I'll say color. I write color colon red. Okay, so this is my style. And why this is called as a class selector? Because it is starting. How do I come to know this is class selector? Because it is starting with a dot, and then starting with a dot here, and then I give some name to it. And then wherever I want to apply it, let us say I start my body tag here. Let us say somewhere here I start my body tag. In the body tag, now I have h1, and then I have to write class is equals to my style, my style, and then I write hello world. Let us say only this much is there in my HTML document. Okay, then let us say only this much is there in my HTML document. This, of course, I have defined it in the head section. Okay, you all know. Then I have to define this in the style tag. Let us say I have to define this in the style tag. You all know this is at the document level. Okay, this is at the document level, and then slash head. Okay, so let us say this is how it is. Let me write the complete program only for you people, so it becomes easy. So I have HTML here, and then finally after this also I have slash HTML. Okay, so now you saw in the head section I've defined a style. Here I have used what? A class selector form, and then I've written the size should be 10 pixels. And then after that I write weight is equals to bold, color is equals to red. And then in this body here, you see that hello world will be displayed with this style. Hello world will be displayed with this style. Why? Because I've mentioned here class is equals to my style. In the h1 tag itself, I use an attribute called as class is equals to I write the value as my style. So for this content, hello world, this style will be applied. And welcome, do you think welcome will also be displayed with this style? No, it won't be. Welcome will have the default style of h1. Welcome will be displayed with what style? The default style of h1. It will be displayed with the default style of h1. Welcome will not be displayed with this style, because I have to write, if I define a class, style here on the top, I have to mention in the tag class is equal to my style, then it will be applied. Let us say I have a p tag here. Let us say I have something like this. So how do you think this is the paragraph text? This is the paragraph. This text, how will it be displayed? It will definitely be displayed with this type. So now you define the style only once. You define the style only once. And then you can apply it on multiple tags. I can apply this style on the h1 tag. I can apply this style on the p tag. I can apply this style on the h2 tag. I can apply this style on the div tag. So the advantage of class selector is that you define the style only once, and then you can apply it on multiple tags. You can apply it on multiple tags. So see, this same style I have applied it for the H1 tag also and for the P tag also. I hope this is clear. Okay. So let us go further. We have understood the style, class selector. We have understood. One thing to remember is that how to define the class selector. It starts with a dot. It starts with a dot followed by some name. It can be any name. First, it can be my style. It can be big. It can be small. It can be any text. Remember, okay. It can be any text. Here you can write any text. This can be any text. It can even be big, okay. And then but only thing is that you have to write it properly here, okay. You have to write this here properly. If you write big there, you have to write big here, and similarly you have to write big here also. You can write big here also, okay. So I hope this is clear with you. Okay, so after this, let us go to the next type of selector. We will go to the next selector, that is class selector is over. Now let us go to the next selector, which is called as ID selector. Yeah, next is ID selector. This is the third type of selector that we will be using. First is element selector. You all know we specify the name of the HTML elements in the style directly. Then we have class selector, where we specify some name to the style prefixed with a dot. Prefixed with a dot, we write dot and then write the name of the class followed by the style. And then in the tag, we specify class is equals to the name of that class which we have defined. Okay, that is class selector. Next, third is ID selector. In ID selector, this is same as ID selector is same as class selector, but the only difference is that I will show you this example here. Directly we'll go to the example. Yeah. In ID selector, we define some style, give some name, just like class selector, we give some name here, but we prefix it with a hash symbol, not a dot. We prefix it with a hash. We prefix it with a hash. And then we define the style here. Let us say the name of my style is latest comment. Latest comment. Some name you can write. I told you, no, you can write any name here. I can write Naveed here. I can write MMEC. I can define some ID. I can define some style by giving some name here. But it should be prefixed with a hash symbol. In case of ID, in case of class, it should be dot. In case of ID, it should be hash. And then whenever you want to apply that style, what you do is you write div, the name of the tag, followed by ID. Followed by ID is equals to latest comment. Latest comment is this style. So you saw that it is same as class selector only. It is same as class selector only. Only thing is that in a class selector, we write a dot. In a ID selector, what we write is a hash symbol. And then here, when we apply that style, we write div ID is equals to latest comment. Then in in case of class style, what we do, we write class is equals to the name of the class style. In case of ID, we write ID is equals to the name of the style. ID, here it should be ID. And in case of class, what it should be? It should be class. Okay, it should start with a dot here, and it should be class. And in case of ID, it will be hash here, and here it will be ID. I hope this is clear. Okay, so you understood even ID selector form. You even understood ID selector form. So we have first element selector, then we have class selector, then we have ID selector. Okay, and then next after that, and then there are some examples given here. You can have a look at the examples. They are same like what I'm telling. And the next is attribute selectors. Next is attribute selectors. Now attribute selectors is again something which is very rarely used. First of all, it is not supported by many browsers. Okay, it is not supported. I will tell you at the most, I have worked on web technologies for so many years. I work on live projects and all that. At the most, what people use is the class selector. That is the most 95% of the times. If there is a selector to be used, we normally use the element selector, or we use the class selector. Class selector is very, very commonly used. Okay, the remaining 5%, we use all these other selectors. So next is attribute selectors. You only see this attribute selectors, how it works, and then do you think this is commonly used, or what you will only come to know. We have attribute selectors. In attribute selectors, what happens is we define an attribute selector form like this. We write some name. We write some name here, title, and title, we write it in a square bracket. We write it in a square bracket. This is attribute selector form. And then we define a style here. When we write a flower bracket like this dotted, means we define some style here. Font size, font weight, all that we write in this. So that's why it is not written here, but we have to assume that there is some style defined here. There is some style defined here, and then we enclose that attribute into square brackets. You can see that there is a square bracket, we write some attribute, and then some style is defined. In the HTML document, now the browser should know where to apply this style. We have defined an attribute style, we have defined here. How will the browser come to know? How will the browser come to know that this style has to be applied somewhere? Now, where will it apply? I will tell you. The browser will apply this style. Now look at, this is a complete example. In the style section, in the head section, we define style, and then we have defined this. In the square brackets, we have defined style, and then we have written cursor is equal to help, padding is equal, we have defined some style. Remember, font size and font weight only, we have defined some style. Where will this style be applied is I will tell you. If there is a tag, any tag it can be P tag, it can be A tag, it can be HTML tag, it can be any tag. In a tag, in any tag, if there is an attribute which is title, the attribute that you mentioned here in the style, if that attribute appears in a tag, the same attribute which you have defined the style for, if that attribute appears, remember, for that tag, this style will be applied. Remember, for this tag here, this style will be applied. Why? Only because this attribute title is appearing here. Why? Because this attribute title is appearing in this tag. That's why. So in whichever tag, you can see here in image tag, there is an attribute called as title which is appearing. In this A tag, there is a attribute called as title appearing. So in all these tags, remember, this style will be applied. So the attribute tag, what happens is you define a style, and then it will be applied to all those tags. In this name attribute appears. There is less than a minute remaining now. I think the class will stop, but I want to continue. I want you people to just join back again, because my class is only there second hour. Okay, I want everybody to please join back. Okay, so that we can continue. Okay, I will stop this meeting and I will start again. You please join back.